Tommy, actually, that's Greg Barnes. We're standing outside Keenan's indoor facility. North Carolina just wrapped up the second media availability practice. Greg, just sort of overall thoughts of what we saw today.
Well, I think for this being entering year 6 of Mack Brown, I think we see the depth finally. There's been some spring practices over the years where you're kind of wondering, are they going to have enough guys out there to send a third team out? And they certainly do, even though there's a number of guys who are out this spring. A lot of young guys, a lot of good young talent, some veteran guys that everybody has heard their name time and time again. So I think it's a good mix, and that's what you want to do as you build a program, is bring in good talent, develop them, let them grow, and they were playing. Third string had some pretty good guys on there, so I think that part of it is very important. And then the other thing that really kind of stood out to me is a lot of those young guys have some potential. There's inconsistency that's going to go with that when you're young and you have to work through it, but you can tell with a lot of guys. I mean, Kamen Rucker is a good example. We knew as a freshman that he had a little bit of a burst, even though it wasn't consistent. And some of these guys that we watched today, as well as the first media outing, they've got some playmaking ability on both sides of the ball, and that's good moving forward.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those young guys. And I think for me today, and if you hear background noise, offensive line getting some more work after practice. But Steve Shipp and Alex Taylor, wide receivers, 1 and 0 on your score sheets. Greg, these young men are the best thing that could have happened for them is for guys to be out. And they've had the ability to get a ton of reps this spring. These guys are going to be special one day, if not this fall.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with the young wide receivers, Jordan Shipp and Alex Taylor. As you said, Taylor, he made an incredible play in tight coverage down the left sideline for a pass play. He had another one for a touchdown. He caught a pass over the middle that was really tough, and then had a good out, about a 10-yard out where he was able to create separation. And that's one thing you really saw with Shipp and Taylor today, is that ability to create separation. That's been an issue for some of these wide receivers over the years, and some of the young guys did. And then Chris Culliver may have had the play of the game with just an incredible burst of speed for about a 50-yard touchdown. So a lot of talent there. I think wide receivers in really good hands moving forward. And like you said, you're not having some guys that typically would be playing. It gives these guys so many more reps, and that's one of the big bonuses of spring ball.
Yeah, you've got a lot of guys out. You got J.J. Jones out. You've got the tight ends out. So you're getting these young wide receivers reps. And Greg mentioned Culliver. Paul Billups has had a good spring. The thing that stood out for me is they do not look like freshmen. They are physically ready to play on this level. The consistency, like you mentioned, will be a thing, and it's always a thing with young people, but their physical presence on the field is not – you don't look at them and say that's a freshman out there. They sort of blend in perfectly. And you mentioned Taylor. Taylor took advantage of Zion Ferguson. It was welcome to the show, rookie. Well, it was being done by other rookies, and Taylor sort of got Ferguson on a sort of a Randy Moss type catch on the sidelines right in front of us. And of course, getting the ball to them is going to be the thing. And quarterback's the discussion that we've had and everybody wants to have, and we'll get into the real thing later, but Max Johnson and Connor Harrell, 2 very different players, Greg. 2 very good plays. They had some plays. They had some inconsistency. It's going to be an interesting battle all the way to fall camp.
For sure. Who did you think played better today?
I'd have to go with Connor Harrell.
I agree with you.
I mean, the one thing about Max Johnson is he's bigger than you think. He's faster than you think. He can make all the throws, but Jason Staples talked about it when he ran his scout, is he's sometimes a little late on letting go of the balls. We saw one over the middle that Elijah Huzzy intercepted. We saw one down the sideline that should have been an easy touchdown. He's good. He can play, but Connor Harrell for me stood out. And Connor Harrell's, if those legs are healthy, he's a problem.
Oh, for sure. And he had about 40-yard touchdown run there late. Yeah, and the benefit of bringing in Max Johnson is you've got a guy who's started a lot of games in the SEC. He's a known quantity. Is he Drake May? No, but nobody expects him to be Drake May. but he's a guy that has a pretty high ceiling in terms of what he can provide. But the benefit of bringing him in is that a guy like Connor Harrell, if he doesn't have somebody pushing him like a Max Johnson, maybe he doesn't develop as quickly as he needs to. And that's one of the things that we heard today is they really like how Connor Harrell's made strides. His throwing motion is a little bit tighter. He's healthy. He's got a big arm, and he's got a lot of speed. So the more reps that he gets, the more competition that he's under, he's going to develop. And whether this year is going to be it for him, where he could beat out Max Johnson, or maybe it's next year, as long as he continues that growth, there's a lot of potential there. And so I think he's got a bright future.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, his wheels, when we get out, he had a draw up the middle today, scored relatively easy. He had a couple other runs. If he can get loose in the open field, it's tough to catch him. It is interesting when we walk in, we see the fastest players on the team listed up there, and you had Omarion Hampton second on the team with 20
Behind Ziegler, yeah.
Behind Malcolm Ziegler. A lot of freshmen on the fastest players on the roster list. But Greg, let's cut to the chase. None of this all matters if the lines aren't what they're supposed to be, and that's the defensive line and the offensive line. Let's start with the offensive line. It looks like maybe the starters are pretty set. It was pretty consistent with those guys, with Blasky in the middle, Sampson and Green on the outside, McGowan and Willie Lampkin on the inside. Your thoughts on what you saw today?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of potential with that starting unit. I think the key for Randy Clements is really going to be developing depth. They like what McGowan has done thus far. They think he's kind of turned the corner. Good player. You got Jonathan Adorno, kind of subbing in with him. And so those two, along with Willie Lampkin at the other guard position, that's a pretty good three-man rotation there. And then, of course, you got Lampkin able to go in at center as well. When you look at the tackle options with Sampson and Green, the guys look like NFL tackles. I mean, they are long.
Absolute monsters.
They're monsters. They're long, they're tall, they're big. Granted, Green's a lot bigger, in terms of size than Sampson is. And they're athletic. And that's really going to be the test for Randy Clements is how quickly can you get those guys up to speed to be able to play come end of August. Ton of potential. And I thought at times that entire unit looked really good.
Yep.
Blasky, I think, brings a lot of experience. I think he's a veteran presence. Lampkin does, of course, as well. And so they've really got to bring those young guys along. And we've talked about it time and time again over the last couple decades, Tommy. It's about chemistry. And if you're able to establish chemistry up front along the offensive line and you have some good pieces, you can have success. But if you have good pieces and you don't have the chemistry, you're going to struggle. If you have chemistry without the pieces, you're also going to struggle. So it's really kind of bringing everything together. I think they've got the pieces, and it's really going to be a matter, can they stay healthy, and can Randy really bring them along during spring and, of course, in the training camp?
Yeah, and everybody asked about Zach Rice. Zach Rice was running on the second team. He looks, a little more in shape and a little fit. They had, I think Sampson got a 15-yard penalty there that Mack sort of chewed him out. But you talk about they are playing hard. They're playing physical. Blasky's going to be that leader in the middle, and I think we've talked about it, and you can watch him right over here working out. Willie Lampkin's going to be the leader of this group. Just of note for folks, and I see it on the message boards a lot, Janai Norwood has been with the offensive line the second half of spring. He was with the defensive line early, and they flipped him to the offensive line, and they said they'll figure it out and see what happens with him to see where he best fits. Greg, on the opposite side of the field, we saw Travis Shaw out here today. We saw Kamen Rucker doing a lot of coaching from the sidelines. This defensive line is another unit that has some talent everywhere, maybe except defensive tackles. But your thoughts, what you saw today, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, I think with the defensive line, you've got some known quantities. You're kind of there in the middle with Hester and Travis Shaw and Jawari Ritzie. And it's really going to be important for Monachino to get those guys that come along and make that step forward to where they're kind of a consistent presence. I think they're fine on the edges with Des Evans and Bo Atkinson and Kamon, of course. But really what stood out to me today, what we talked about it earlier with some of the young guys popping, some of the young guys along the defensive line. Just I jotted down some names of guys who made big plays. Tyler Thompson, we heard his name a bunch. He's quick, he's big. I really like what he can bring off the edge. Joel Starlings is somebody in the middle that they think has a lot of potential. I think he'll probably play a good bit as long as he's continuing on his current track and stays healthy. And then Daniel Anderson.
Yes.
Anderson could have taken off Connor Harrell's arm in one play, and he kind of got chewed on from Mack Brown a little bit from getting too close. But I thought all three of those guys really showed some potential today. And I think Starlings is the key there to really encourage the older guys and kind of push them along. They need to help him as well. So, yeah, it's going to be the interior. I think they're going to be fine moving forward. But how quickly can those young guys come along? And can those veterans really step out and have a very strong season? Because I think that's going to be critical for what Jeff Collins wants to do.
Absolutely, and I thought Malachi Hamrick, very aggressive player. He was fired up and in practice the whole time on the edge there. A couple names folks may not want to or may not have heard or may not expect to hear. Cade Law and Ashton Woods, those two guys, linebacker-wise, played. You got Jakeem Harris back there in the secondary. You got Elijah Huzzy. He's going to be one of the best corners in the country. He benefited from Max Johnson's bad throw and made an interception. The thing about Huzzy, Greg, is he's always around the football, and he's always making plays, and he just looks like he's going to be that guy this year. And they've moved him to corner where he can get some time.
Right, and he's a playmaker. I think Jakeem Harris is kind of the same way. So you have a couple of playmakers back there. But as we've seen before, and kind of beating an old drum here, if your defensive line's not getting a little bit of push, it's hard to tell how good your secondary is. And so I think that's going to be a key component this year. We hadn't even talked about Amarian Hampton. He looks good. He's really fast. I mean, it's crazy. He's as fast as he is. Been told he's broken off a number of long touchdown runs in practices. And then one thing, Tommy, you mentioned Hamrick. Some of the older guys, when they're working with some of the younger guys, is key. We can talk about young guys all day long, but I think it's very important to note that there's some good leaders on this team. At the end of practice, or towards the end of practice, a player came off the field, was visibly frustrated, slammed his helmet down, and as soon as he did that away from everybody else, who went over there immediately? Power Eccles, K'Mon Rucker, Ritzy was over there. I mean, quickly, to talk to him, to pump him up, all those things. Leadership is so important when you've got a group this big and you're trying to bring along young guys to help. And so I think they've got a good group of leaders as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it all comes back down to Mack Brown, and he's the head going into year 6 here. But this team is going to be a little different this year. I think North Carolina relied on Drake May a ton last year. It's not going to be like that for this team. It's going to come down to a team effort. I think they've got talent in the wide receiver room. They've got talent at running back. Obviously, we did not see Amarian much. We did see Darren Barlow. We saw Davion Goss. And we also, really Major Bird, for folks that are wondering who 32 is, that is Major Bird, moved to running back for depth purposes in practice. He had a long touchdown run. And we got to see Michael Merdinger, third-string quarterback, make a few plays. It's clear he's got a ways to go to be in the mix.
Fans are going to like him. He is high energy.
Yeah, he is going to be an interesting player to watch. And, of course, we haven't covered it all. Stay tuned to On the Beat Live tonight with Adam and Jeremiah and Evan bring their takes on here. It was a good day in Chapel Hill to be able to observe not only practice but a scrimmage. Just closing thoughts for you, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, just want to echo what I said earlier. I think there's a lot of good depth here, a lot of good talent in the younger classes. And I think you're exactly right. Drake May really helped this team and kind of carried this team the last 2 years. And you don't have that ability now for somebody to kind of drag you along. But I think there's enough pieces here, and I think they have a really good staff in place now where you can say, look, guys, we don't have anybody to bail us out. We've got to do it position group by position group, and I think there's enough here to do that. Now, what does that translate to into wins and losses? I think we can all agree this is a team that has the potential to win 8-9 games. If some of those things come together better than we think, maybe they can win some more. But that's the fun of spring ball, and that's the fun of training camp, Tommy.
Yep, hope springs eternal every year. It's been Greg Barnes. I'm Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Shout out to everybody here. Shout out to Evan, Jeremiah, Jim Hawkins taking photos, Jalen running video. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina for the rest of the coverage. We'll talk soon.